What's up, guys? I am super excited about today's podcast because I just interviewed a friend of mine from back in college, one of the greatest goalkeepers of all times. I truly mean it, Christian Murillo. Christian has been living a life full of passion that he has been so committed to, from traveling through 10 different countries after graduating college to then quitting his corporate job to become full-time photographer and living in a tiny house. Christian has done so much, and there's just so much valuable information to share here. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. Don't forget to watch it through the end because Christian has a special message for you. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Alrighty, Christian, my man, how's it going? I am so excited to interview you today. I know I've been trying to get a hold of you for the past few weeks, but it seems like you're always on top of a mountain with no cell coverage, no internet connection. So I am stoked for today and to be able to talk to you. I feel like there's a lot that you can share with us, and you're truly an inspiration to me just because of the things that you have done and the things that you continue to do. And it's super impressive, and I'm very excited. How's it going? Where are you today?
What's up, Leo? I'm at home in my new home in Bend, Oregon, and I apologize for not being so available the past couple weeks. Like you said, I'm kind of always out and about, exploring the wilderness around here, and wilderness is quite accessible out here, but cell phone service not so much. So I'm excited to be here with you, and just stoked that you set aside a bit of time that I get to share some of my experiences and my story.
Of course, man. Like I said, I am super excited to talk to you today. I have so many questions, but I kind of just want to do exactly what I always do and just try to go back to like when you were a little younger, maybe, even before high school, and try to understand like what you were doing then. I know right now you're doing tons of photography and things like that, but I don't think it has always been like that. And how did that start? Did it start when you were young with your first camera, or how did this all kind of happen back then?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because you and I met back on the soccer field at UCF, and and it's interesting the relationship that soccer actually had with my starting of photography. And for basically my whole life, soccer was like the thing. And it's what I poured the most time and effort into. And one summer when I was 15 years old, I spent a couple months in Bolivia training with a professional team in La Paz. And that summer, my dad had just bought a family camera, and I had asked if I could bring the camera down to Bolivia because I figured there'd be some cool things to take pictures of along the way, and I had no idea what I was doing from a photographic standpoint, but just the amount of raw beauty out there made getting hooked into it so easy. So I thought it was kind of interesting how that transition of passions just kind of happened gradually over time, but seamlessly as well.
That's really cool. When you first started taking pictures, was it just of anything or mostly nature like you do now?
Yeah, when I first started, I definitely took pictures of anything and everything, but I've always felt some sort of magnetism towards natural landscapes, especially those that are unaltered by man. And I grew up reading National Geographic magazines and watching shows like Planet Earth and Life and stuff like that. And the natural world has just always fascinated me a lot more than people, for example.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of like a brash way to put it, but it's just what fires me inside. So I mean, to answer your question, yeah, I shot everything because I I didn't have the focus or like vision or develop like a style yet. But what I did know is that I was witnessing some incredible things, and to not document them through my lens was it seemed like a crime at the time.
And did you ever think you'd go full time with that one day, or was there never like was just like a hobby then?
Yeah, it was just a hobby then, and it wasn't until the year after that in high school that I take it a little bit more seriously. But as far as seeing it as a career, that honestly wasn't even a vision until a couple of years ago. I mean, I went to school and studied engineering, and I kind of always thought that I would do that and keep photography on the side. But when you do have a passion like that, and you're spending every moment at your day job thinking about carrying out your passion, then eventually, you gotta you gotta decide if you're just gonna keep whatever it is as a hobby, or if you're gonna figure out a way to monetize it and try and have a
Yeah.
shot of creating a successful business.
And I think we're gonna get there soon, because I do love how passionate you are about it and how you completely change your life to adapt to the lifestyle of being a photographer and being surrounded by nature and all of this stuff. So when you went to UCF, you graduated with an engineering degree, correct?
Yep, industrial engineering.
And so, what made you consider that major at first? Having such a big passion for photography, at that early stage.
Yeah, so actually, when I took a tour of the UCF campus before, attending there, I met with directors from the engineering program as well as from the fine art photography program. And I mean, as a naive high school kid, I thought it would be entirely possible to do a dual major in industrial engineering and photography. But I pretty quickly learned that none of the courses overlap, and I would essentially be in school for twice as long if I took that route. So I kind of decided that, in terms of like making a successful career, although at the time I still thought I was set on engineering, photography was still kind of just like a hobby.
Mhm.
Um, but I thought that you needed a degree in engineering to have a successful career in engineering, but you maybe didn't as much need a degree in photography to be a successful photographer. So that's kind
Uh,
of how I pulled the
yeah.
trigger and decided between the two.
How difficult? So this is, I feel like, something people struggle with a lot. They go to college and they get a degree in something so technical like engineering, for example, that after they graduate and they get into a job, whatever, they realize, man, like maybe engineering wasn't really for me, but I feel like I gotta stay here and do this job just because it took me 5 years and I paid a ton of money for this degree. And now I feel stuck, and I feel a lot of people feel that way. They feel like they can't get out of that environment because they've been preparing themselves and they paid so much money to do this job and be in this field that they can't get out of that. So how did you put that in your head? Because and
Yeah.
I guess we're getting there right now. So after you graduated college, you started doing a job as a consultant, correct, in Atlanta?
Yep. Yep.
And then from there, shortly after, you just decided to go full time photography. So how did you make that transition? Like, did you have that in your conscious that, man, like after 5 years of whatever engineering school, I'm just gonna was it difficult?
Yeah. So I mean, just being able to justify that transition, that is difficult, because you graduate with a bachelor's degree in engineering, and after school, I traveled for a bit, and we might talk about that later. But I had a great job right out of college. Good pay, good benefits, decent work-life balance, and in all honesty, I didn't hate my job. It wasn't like I've heard some people say like, oh, I was being driven crazy by my job and I needed to make a switch. For me, that wasn't the case. I mean, there were a lot of things that I wasn't a big fan of about my job, but overall, I liked the lifestyle that it let me live, and I wasn't unhappy. So it took digging a bit deeper to find, a really good reason to leave. Um, and I think one of the most important transitions to that mindset was understanding and learning how to live a fulfilling life and a happy life that doesn't necessarily rely on material wealth. Because as any artist has gone through, when you start out a career in any arts industry, you have to make a lot of sacrifices, and especially when you're freelancing, it's not like you get a paycheck coming every 2 weeks, and exactly how big the paycheck is going to be, and you can budget accordingly. It's a completely different dynamic, so that required me to shift my mindset on what mattered most to me, and adapt my lifestyle accordingly.
Yeah.
And once I got my head around that, the concept of spending the majority of time where I was spending the majority of my thoughts made the most sense to me.
I honestly, I think I kind of share the same things, and I say this all the time. It's like my biggest fear is living a life full of regrets, right? With my personal transition from my corporate job to what I do now, and it all came down to exactly what you're saying, which is living a fulfilled life and just being happy and making sure that the things that you're doing really matter to you, and you're not doing something just because you have to, or because you have this degree that you have to now use it. So that stuff's super inspiring to me, and I feel like a lot of people going through that moment, through that phase in life right now, can relate. So going back again to college, I know you're planning a big trip. Um, what was going through your mind then, and what made you, not go straight to a job? Because I think that's what a lot of us were doing at the time as a senior, applying for jobs and just going straight into working. But I feel like you did something different instead, right?
Yeah. I accepted the job that I ended up taking in Atlanta, right just before I graduated, but I made clear to my employer that I needed 6 months. I wanted to take some time for myself, mostly because I wasn't 100% sold on the future that I was kind of laying out for myself.
Hold on, man.
And
Let me stop you there real quick, because I never heard of that before, and that's cool. How did you negotiate that? So they wanted to hire you straight out of college, and you said I can start in 6 months from then, and that's how it went.
yeah, I already had my flight tickets booked
Oh, okay.
out of the country. So I was like, yeah, I mean, this sounds like a great opportunity. I'd love to work for your company, but I can't start until June. And they were like, that's fine, because they hired in cycles, so they just kind of threw me in the next cycle.
Oh,
So
I got you.
yeah, and as a supply chain software consultant, it wasn't exactly like I was filling like a very specific position. They would hire like a batch of kids out of college,
Yeah.
at a time, and then so I just got thrown in with the next batch. So I was really fortunate to have the opportunity, but yeah, I didn't have any like crazy negotiating skills to to get that worked
At
out.
least you pulled it off. That's pretty cool. But
Yeah.
so how did you plan this trip? How many countries did you visit? And was this mostly driven by photography, or just
Yeah.
because you wanted to do it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, um, I've been fortunate in my life to have traveled quite a bit. So coming out of college, I was fully aware that once I started a career, it's not just like starting a job. You're starting your career, and once you go down that path, you're gonna have your 10 or 12 days or 14 days, whatever, of PTO, and that's the window of flexibility that you have to do things that you want to do outside of work. And I mean, that's all well and good, but if you want to go places that are geographically quite far away, you're going to have to save up a bunch of PTO to make that time worth it. So I knew that this was like my last chance before potentially switching jobs or retiring, that I would get to travel and learn about the world and take my camera with me, and kind of figure things out for myself, get that clarity that I needed, that wasn't so accessible in my busy day-to-day life.
Yeah. So how many countries total did you visit?
Yeah. So I went to 10 countries across all the continents except Antarctica and North America.
Wow.
So I started. So I went with our friend Andres, who we played soccer with, and he was the best travel companion that I could ask for. I mean, his strengths were where my weaknesses were, and I think when you travel, logistics can be challenging, and being with the same person all the time can also be challenging. But he was a really critical part of making that trip as much of a success as it was. But so we started in Peru. We were only there for a couple of days just to spend some time with his family in Peru, and then we went down to Chile, and then Australia, and then Bali, Indonesia, and then India, Turkey, Ghana, England, Scotland, and Iceland.
Wow.
So, and that was over 4 months. So it was super fast paced trip.
What
And
was
I
the
don't, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask, what was the most challenging part about being out for 4 months? Because I don't think this was a trip where everything was planned, right?
No, I mean, we had all our flights booked. Like, we knew which countries we were going to go to, but we hardly planned anything once we got to each place. Um, and I think we intended to have that sort of structure, to leave room to talk to people, to talk to locals, to talk to other travelers, and figure out what are the cool things to do, and what are the things that you might find on Lonely Planet, but so does everyone else. So we wanted to have a unique experience. So yeah, we winged a lot of things, and honestly, it really did work out surprisingly well. So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty transformative experience for me. But I would say the biggest challenge was just, that was my first time like actually living out of a backpack. So like the first we did a 9 days of backpacking in Patagonia in Chile, and just like getting used to living out of a backpack was so hard for me. Like I think I lost one item from my backpack every single day that we were backpacking. And I think part of that was my subconscious was like getting rid of stuff that I didn't need to make my pack lighter. But yeah, just keeping track of everything and just getting used to like a vagabond life after you've lived in the same place for a couple of years. You have a lot of stability, and then all of a sudden it's like go, go, go. And it's just very different lifestyle.
Yeah, I can't believe that because like your body is just so used to the routine that you go through for however long you're in college for, and then you just completely change that so quickly. and you spend 4 months just, traveling everywhere. And, I guess in some places you guys probably had some difficulties with language, speaking and stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think like the biggest place of language barrier was probably either Indonesia and Bali, or Iceland. Both places were already quite popular with tourism, so we never had like a massive communication issue, and we both speak Spanish. So in South America, we were fine. Obviously, Australia, England, and Scotland are all English-speaking countries. But with that said, I probably understood the Scottish people less than people that spoke English from any other part of the world.
That's hilarious. That's funny. And did you have one best place that you visited that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really tough to pick favorites because all of the places were truly incredible, just with different appeals. But I think the whole trip, we were really looking forward to Iceland, and that was like the last stop that we had. And I think that was made extra special because Andres and I, we had been together for like 3.5 months, and we're starting to like, I don't want to say like get tired of each other, but when you spend that much time with any one person, tensions kind of naturally arise.
Right.
But when we got to Iceland, our friends Jacob and Josh, who from playing soccer at UCF, and then our other friend Andre came and joined up with us, and we just rented a 4x4 SUV and just did a road trip for like 10 days.
And I know you guys, I've heard the story before. There's something crazy that happened, right? To get like, didn't you get your tire, you get a flat tire or something?
Yeah, we were driving in the Icelandic Highlands, and actually Andre and Josh had hitched a ride back to Reykjavik, Icelandic Highlands, and it started like first of all, we couldn't even read the Icelandic signs that said that the road was closed for the season. So we felt like idiots for even being out there in the first place. But the Icelandic language is ridiculous and really hard to understand, let alone read. So we're on this road that was closed for the season, and we go a couple miles, and we're looking at it on a map. Like it's a road that's supposed to connect us to like another main road. And it looks like it's not that far, like maybe like 5 miles. So we drive like a mile in, and we're crossing rivers in our 4x4 SUV, and it's like, oh, this is fun, adventure. It's what it's supposed to be like. And then we get into the snow a little bit, and we're still trudging along, and we get stuck once, we get out, we get stuck twice, and we get out, and we're like, we just had that genuine feeling like this is what adventure is supposed to be like. And then we really got stuck. and we spent and we were totally not prepared. We spent about 3 hours trying to dig the car out using a Frisbee and our bare hands. So our hands were like freezing, our gloves were soaked and wet, and we were not getting the car out, and a blizzard was pretty quickly.
Oh my God.
So thankfully we called the Icelandic like emergency line, and they sent help from a town like 2 hours away, and this guy and his son, they're heroes, men, but they rolled up in like the biggest like Ford F-550 that I've ever seen. It was just this massive truck with like 50-inch snow tires, and they hooked us up to a winch and bailed us out. And we felt terrible, that they had just spent like the better part of their day bailing out some unprepared and stupid tourists. But it makes for a decent story, I guess, and it was a pretty memorable experience.
Exactly. That's something you never forget, and it's always something you're gonna relate and want to talk to people about. That's super interesting. So when you got back from the trip, you created your own book, right? Your own photography book from from your trip?
Yeah. Going into the trip, I did a little Kickstarter project to kind of like fund the book. So it was a project that I was working on throughout my trip, and it was a photo book that was kind of a mixture of portrait and landscape photography. And I wanted to tell not only the story of the incredible landscapes that we witness, with landscape photography being my specialty, but also tell the story of the people that were the biggest help, and the people that I met along the way that either left a lasting impression on me or went out of their way to help me out when they really didn't have to. So I wanted to tell their stories as well, and kind of draw a connection between the land and the locals. And in some cases, it wasn't locals; there's other travelers, but people that shared experiences with me in those places that I fell in love with so much.
Dude, that's amazing. I hope to one day be able to write a book too, but it's definitely a project that I feel like it's going to take a little bit of time, and it's probably not something I can do right now. But so after you get back from your trip, you create this amazing book, and then you head right into a brand new job after graduating or with your college degree and all. And I believe this is something that I always remember, because I love when people come up with me and they have like a huge goal that they want to accomplish, and following up with them a few years later, I can see that they've gone above and beyond, and that goal is now a full-time job and passion or whatever. And what I'm getting at is exactly about 2 years ago, I want to say, you were taking pictures for my grand opening here in Plant City. And, I think we spent a weekend here, and part of what we were talking about was just, job transition and like doing things that we love and our passion. And I remember you telling me that your passion is really photography, and that you're really trying to figure out how to go full time. And I think you had a planned trip, because I know you're a big hiker, right? And you had one of the biggest hikes of your life that are planned. What was it, in Venezuela?
It was in Bolivia, yeah.
Right, and you had this trip plan, and you're saying, hey, like this is just building me momentum for what I'm trying to do, which is go full time in photography, and I hope to one day be able to be a photographer for National Geographic, which I guess I would think is the ultimate goal for a photographer. And it sounds like you're right there right now, and that's just amazing. Talk to me about this transition, and what did you have to do to get to where you are now?
Yeah. So, going back to one of your earlier questions about, my engineering degree and getting the engineering job, a lot of people have asked me, like, do you ever regret that? And 100% no, like not at all. And part of the reason is because that gave me 2 years while I was working in Atlanta to build up my photography business on the side, and spending every minute after work on the weekdays and every minute on the weekends trying to just build my portfolio locally, and connect with other professionals locally, and just learn and make a lot of mistakes, and just figure out the business side of things, and obviously like continuing to grow as a photographer as well. But just being able to go through that while I had an engineering job and a stable income, it just gave me that like security blanket. And I hesitate to say security blanket, but it created an environment in which I could make mistakes that I needed to make for my personal growth, and have them not be detrimental to the success or failure of my future career as a photographer. So yeah, I mean, I kind of just took as many jobs as I could on the side, trying to just build my photography business up little by little. And eventually it got to the point where my photography business had grown enough that it was like, I can't do both of these jobs full time. I either keep photography as a hobby and just keep it, do it on the weekends, or I make the leap of faith and ditch this secure lifestyle that I've kind of mapped out for myself up until this point, and try something really bold. And a lot of people have told me, it's really hard to make it as a photographer, and yeah, it is. Like, I'm going through that now, and I think I'll probably always go through that to some extent, but so far I would not turn around and do it any other way, because every day I wake up wanting to work and feeling fulfilled and feeling like my work has a purpose. And like you said earlier about, your biggest fear is living a life full of regrets. I share that with you, and I don't regret, a single day that I spend doing the work that I do now.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. I feel like when you are working on something that you're so passionate about, regardless of how difficult it is, you're always going to make it work, just because that's your passion, that has been your dream, and that's something that you're just going to be willing to find ways to figure out how to get better, how to make more money, how to get bigger. So it's something that I feel like a lot of us share as young solo entrepreneurs, or small business owners, that we'll do anything to make it happen and make it possible. What were some of your paying gigs? Because I know you do a lot of pictures outside, like in the wilderness, as you explained. What were some of your paying gigs as you had your corporate job? Were you doing some real estate stuff? Is that what it was?
Yeah, one of the biggest factors for me was generating revenue from print sales, with landscape photography. That's definitely one of the target markets, and that's one of the most flattering things for me as a photographer, is like when someone buys a print. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. It's like someone not only likes my work, but they see something in that photograph that really resonates with them enough to make them want to put it in their home or in their office. And that's a really special thing to me. So that was one of the avenues. And then it was, doing commercial photo shoots. Like I did a photo shoot for like an engineering company, and then doing some portrait stuff here and there. I mean, really, and still to this day, it's a matter of like scrapping and getting your slice of the pie any way you can. And it's not glamorous. It's
Right.
It's hardly refined, but it is a tough industry to be in, especially in this day and age with the proliferation of photography and its role in social media and all that. Like, everyone is and calls themselves or wants to
Yeah.
be a photographer, and everyone wants to do work for free. So that makes it tough, because even if you think your work is really good, competing with free is always going to be an uphill battle. But that's a challenge that I'm willing to take. And you mentioned, all the things that you kind of have to sacrifice as like a small business owner, or a person that wants to go out on this venture. And to me, I 100% agree with that. But from a different angle, you might have to sacrifice certain things about your lifestyle, or your budget, like how you live, the choices you make, and all that. But ultimately, the biggest sacrifice in life is not doing what you're truly passionate about. So I'm sure you've gotten this as well, that people ask, like, oh, like, don't you feel like you've had to sacrifice so much? And it's like, well, no, I have had to make sacrifices, but I've kept the thing that's most important to me at the core of my vision. And that's a beautiful thing about having your work life be your baby, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Um, so not that you haven't done so much already. I mean, I really want to get to one of the things that, I mean, a lot of what you said is super impressive, but so, just touching base, you graduate from college, you went on a trip around the world, then you landed yourself a great job and then realized that you want to go full-time photography. So you did that. And now you're speaking to me from Oregon, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
you're now a tiny house owner. So how did that one come about from going full time photography to now being all the way across the country with the tiny house?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. As far as the tiny house goes, the couple big motivations for that was one, knowing that I'm going to be diving into this photography career, diving straight into the deep end. And one of the biggest obstacles in that is adapting my lifestyle so that I can afford it, you know? So one of the biggest appeals of going tiny was that it would allow me to lower my living expenses a lot. Um, and
So
um,
when you say so,
yeah,
when I think of a tiny house, I automatically think about not paying rent or having a huge mortgage. Is there like additional things that minimizes your living expenses that we don't think about?
yeah, for sure. So my fiance and I paid for the tiny house outright,
Okay.
so we don't have a mortgage. And eventually, we hope to buy some land so that we can park it rent free. But right now, um, we pay a small rent on the land that we park on, and that includes internet, water, utilities, and all that stuff. So especially compared to the rest of the housing market out here in Bend, we're saving quite a bit of money month to month by having the shelter over our heads already paid for, and just paying a much lower monthly cost just for a place to park it. So that's worked out quite well, and I'm super fortunate to have the support from my fiance as well.
Yeah.
While I'm going through this like transition period.
So who convinced who, Christian? Or
Oh
how?
man, I I mentioned the idea a couple years ago, and she like so immediately like called me insane and and thought it was completely ridiculous. And then like a year ago, her mom was visiting us in Atlanta and made a joke about how it would be really funny if we bought a tiny house. And we hadn't like even thought about the idea since like she originally shot it down so quickly. And but then we started like thinking about it again, and we're like, well, one, we know we don't really want to stay in Atlanta, but we don't know where we want to settle down permanently. And we do know that we don't want to keep paying rent and just like tossing like our money away. And so somehow we figured out that it made sense. And here we are in a 31-foot tiny house.
And what
And
has
it's,
what has been the biggest obstacle or challenge from moving from like I guess a large house to a tiny house?
yeah, honestly, there haven't really been that many challenges. When we first moved in, we moved the tiny house from Atlanta all the way out to Bend, Oregon. So it was like a 3,000-mile journey. And I think, moving the house that big of a distance into a radically different climate, those are all kind of contributing factors that when we were setting up, it was like snowing like crazy in Bend, Oregon. And that was my first time shoveling snow ever. And we had like some water leaks and we had some gas leaks. So we're just like, first couple weeks, we are just like fixing everything, and life was just kind of in.
Wow, you didn't live in your house until you moved it across the country.
Yeah. So like our first night in the house was in Oregon, and it was snowing. It snowed like 8 inches or something that day. And I was just like, how did we end up here? Like, I was just totally in over my head, overwhelmed, and thinking like, I really hope we didn't make a mistake. Um, but now we've been here for like 3.5 months, and obviously it's warmed up quite a bit, so that's nice. And the house is working like a well-oiled machine now, and we're pretty comfortable. Wouldn't really change anything, to be honest.
That's awesome. So, and what was the reason to move across the country?
Um, Although I was growing my photography business in Atlanta, I was finding it quite difficult to find a market in the city, um, of people that could really identify with my type of work. So my focus was in landscape photography, and or is and although the Blue Ridge Mountains are only like an hour and a half from Atlanta, I found that because it's a big city, people are so consumed in the city life that they don't even know the mountains exist, and how beautiful those mountains really are. So I was having more success in selling my photographs in like the Blue Ridge Mountain area of North Carolina, and selling photos to magazines based in the Carolinas and in Virginia, than I was, selling to my neighbors, for example. So I saw kind of limited potential in terms of how receptive my audience would be in Atlanta, and I was just commuting super far, driving 2, 3, 4 hours once or twice a week up to the mountains. And I was just thinking like, man, like I'm putting so many miles on my car, and like I spend so much time just on the road that I could be, doing more productive work.
Yeah.
So I just thought, you know, I would really love to live closer to the mountains where I can get more work done, and find an audience that can really appreciate what I bring to the table.
Right.
And Bend seemed like a really good spot to do it. And so far, I mean, just kind of getting the business thing started out here, but I've kind of hit the ground running, and have already found more positive feedback than I got being in such a big city.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like business is going great because you just announced a few weeks ago working with National Geographic on some sort of gig.
Yeah. So I just got back from the training in Vermont, but I'll be working with National Geographic and leading 2 of their student photography workshops. So teaching has always been a big passion of mine. Partly just because I find it enjoyable, but also because I think teaching is so valuable in the mission of leaving a legacy in your life, passing on knowledge. Like that's what mankind has done since the existence of mankind, and that's why we are where we are today as a species. And I just want to keep that growth on younger generations in a positive way, and the most direct way to do that is to be directly involved with the younger community. So I'll be leading 2 photography workshops, one in Yellowstone National Park and one in Yosemite National Park, and I'll be working with other professional photographers, and a Nat Geo photographer, like a Nat Geo contracted photographer, on each one of those trips. So that's a huge opportunity, to share as much knowledge as I have on these high school students, but also for me to just learn the ins and outs of, you know, what it means to work for such an iconic company in the photography industry.
Brother, I can't help but smile every time I talk to you because it's truly inspiring everything that you have done up to this point. It's almost like every single path direction that you take, you find a small success, and it just keeps getting better and better. And that's why I really wanted to get you on this podcast. And I'm so thankful that you were able to find the time, the cell phone connection, and everything worked out for this, even though I'm the one in Florida having a horrible connection because, of course, it's summer and it's always raining, and, that's never good for the internet. But I want to thank you. But before we leave and close out here, the main reason for this podcast and the reason why you're a good fit for this interview too is because I always try to motivate people if I can to pursue their passion. If the passion is, to quit a job to do something that they want to do as an entrepreneurship or to travel the world like you did, or anything. So what is, one advice that you have either from experience or that you've heard from someone else that can motivate people to not live their lives based on someone else's expectation, or because, they have always expected to live this life, and now, they finally found their true passion, but they're scared to go for it. So what is one of the advice that you have for these people listening, that really want to do something different or try something new, but they're just feeling somewhat limited or stuck or a little bit afraid?
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of two tokens that I've found really helpful for me. And the first being that, you kind of touched on it a bit, and like, you need to manage your own expectations for your life, and not allowing what someone else's vision for you dominate how you live your life. Because at the end of the day, it sounds super morbid, but I think about it all the time. Like, on my deathbed, like, what would I be proud of having done in my life? And if I get to that point and I've lived my life entirely for someone else's expectations, then that precisely would be a life filled with regret. But the second token, this is in by no means my quote. I believe it was John Krakauer, who he's the author of Into Thin Air and Into the Wild. Some incredible books if you guys ever get the chance to read it. But one of his mantras is, there's only two great risks in life: that you can risk too much or you can risk too little. So obviously in his world of mountain climbing and all that, risking too much can have some grave consequences, but risking too little can have just as bad consequences as well, because if you're not living a life that's fulfilling, then every day you're just dying a little bit more inside. And so I try keeping that in the back of my mind, both when I'm trying to climb some insane mountain and it feels super sketchy, and also when I'm just trying to get off my couch and do something that I've never done before. It's a good mantra to keep in the back of your mind and kind of add fuel to the fire whenever you need it.
I love it, man. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. And so right before we close out, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so my photography website is where all my photos are, and that's murillophoto.com. And then on Instagram, I am at the letter C, Murillo Photo. And my last name is spelled Murillo.
Alrighty.
I always get asked to clarify that. Yeah. So
I'll post that on the show notes. But anyways, man, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us. And I hope to catch up with you soon in this podcast. in a few months from now to just see where you're at and just gonna, monitor to see how things are going and see your progress, man.
Thanks a lot, Leo. I honestly just feel honored, that you even put me in that category of people. So I'm just stoked to share the little bit of knowledge and experience that I do have at this point. But I definitely look forward to keeping tabs with you and following up on your successes as well. Those definitely can't go unnoticed. So we'll be in touch, man.
That's it, brother. Thank you so much.